Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be focusing on just letting you know about the different types of editing that are available to you when having your books, children's books edited or your non-fiction books. So there are four main types of editing. And the first one we're going to look at is really developmental editing. And in this type of editing, it helps the author develop their content, work on plots, fact checking, organizing the entire story so that it flows. They examine the tone of the manuscript, ensure that it flows again, and they look at the formatting of the story. So your developmental editor really looks on how the story comes across, the content. Do you need additional information to build on your story? They look at the big picture to make sure that the plot makes sense. So they take your manuscript and look chapter by chapter, paragraph by paragraph, line by line, ensuring that your story is complete, it's fully developed, and it's ready for your next set of editing, right? So that's I would say the first type of editing that your book goes through if you're doing sort of a non-fiction work, right? You want to ensure that your content is full and robust. So the developmental editor is that one that helps your content to come alive and to just be full. There's no gaps in information, things like that. So for your nonfiction writers, though, that's the first type of editing that your editor would look at. And so your editors, if you're looking at children's book, then the editor may not necessarily do developmental editing, but more the other form of editing, which is what we're going to look at. So it's more for your non-fiction writers, your stories, your teen books, your anything of that sort. Developmental editing is required if you're doing especially chapter books. Now, the other type of editor or editing that we have is called content or line editing. And what this editor does is really to look at your sentence and your paragraph and to rewrite those if it's needed. They must have a firm grasp of the language and ensure that the author's intended meaning comes across. So they kind of polish the story and look at things that may force the author to, instead of writing out the meaning of what they're saying, bring it out in such a way that not every single detail of the word or what the author is trying to say is written, but the story is told in such a way that the reader can deduce from it what the author is trying to say. So the content or line editor really looks at ensuring that the content is flowing, the sentence is flowing. They're not necessarily looking for grammar at this time or punctuations, but just the content itself, to make sure that what you're intended for your audience to get from it is what they're getting, and that you're not too wordy in your manuscript. So you're not repeating words, you're not using the incorrect word, right? You're not using jargon that may not be relevant to your audience. So your content or line editor is focusing on these things and just cleaning up what a developmental editor would have probably done, and making sure that your sentences are flowing and are telling the story of how it's intended to. The next type of editor is really your copy editor. And what the copy editor is slightly different from your content or line editor. Your copy editor ensures that, one, you don't get cited for copywriting, right? So they look at your quotes. If you've acknowledged the author of the quotes in your book, they look at references that you have made, ensure that you're actually referencing the right thing, the quotes that you've put in. They look at hyphenations, they check word usage, they ensure that your chapters match up to what you have in your table of contents. And if you have a bibliography, that's their job to ensure that that's cited. So that's what your copy editors do. They're ensuring that, again, as I said, you're not flagged for copywriting. You are highlighting other people's work and not necessarily just including it in your book without acknowledgement. So that's really what the copy editor is doing. And they're really like the third step. So you start with your developmental editing, then you do your content or line editing, and then the copy editors come in and take a look at that. Then the next step, and really what we would think is the final step is your proofreading. So after your editor, if you have one editor that can do all 4 of these, fantastic. You usually have a different type of editor doing maybe 1 or 2 of them, right? But for those major publishing houses that offer the services, you'll probably have a department of editors. So your manuscript is passing through phases, right? But for our children's book authors, really, you can look at having a content editor and a proofreader. So you hire an editor that can do that for you and make sure that your words are flowing and your words actually are in line with the age group of the children that you are serving and that you're writing for. So back to our proofreaders. As I said before, this is the last stage. And what the proofreaders do now is to fine-tune your manuscript. So they are now looking at everything. They're looking at developmental. Did your development of your story make sense? Did the line editing or editor miss something? Did they miss referencing a quote? Is there a grammar issue in this sentence? Is there a typo, punctuation, fonts, typeface? This type of editor has the final eyes on your manuscript, and so they're looking at everything from top down, line by line, ensuring that everything is perfect. This type of editor has to be meticulous. And so when we think of proofreaders, we think of just somebody just looking at your work and ensuring that the grammar is correct and your punctuation is correct. And we think that that's just the simplest form of it. That's not necessarily true. Your proofreaders have the final eyes on your manuscript, and anything that was missed from developmental editing stage or line editing stage or copy editing stage has to be picked up by your proofreaders. They need to make the final checks. They need to look at your manuscript in such a way that as if they're doing an exam. They must be meticulous. They must have a good grasp of the language, and they should be able to just identify if there's anything that is missed and needs to go back to maybe the developmental editor or the line editor for correction. So those are the 4 types, main types. Of course, there may be others, but the 4 main types of editors or editing that are done on the your manuscript when you're getting it completely edited. Whether you're doing non-fiction will more than likely encompass all 4. And if you're doing fiction, then it's maybe 1 or 2 out of the 4 that you're looking at. So if you're at this stage where you're trying to figure out how to get your book edited, then I've linked Fiverr in my description. As always, you can get your services there. Fiverr is a freelancer website where you can post your job request and you can get your editors there. I personally used editors from Fiverr. Just ensure that you review the reviews that they have, and ensure that that's the type of editor that you need. Post your job and take your time to identify what it is that you want from that editing. I hope this helps, and as usual, if you have any questions, comments, or just suggestions, please post it in the comments. I look forward to hearing from you. Take care.